how they can.
Hi guys, thanks for joining. We're just going to wait 2 more minutes for a few more people to join us and then we'll kick off. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second Bhekadala webinar this year. My name's Gaino, and I'll be your host for today. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. I know everyone is very busy at the moment, so we are happy to have you all with us. If this is your first webinar that you're joining with Bhekadala, let me just tell you a little bit about why we are here. As a brand which is focused on innovation and technology, we want to create a space where we can connect and share knowledge with each other while also solving uniquely African problems through technology. With us today to tell us a little bit more about the Bhekadala vision is Dylan, who heads up the business development department within Bhekadala. He's going to give us a short introduction as to what the brand is about, what we're passionate about, and why we are really coming together in this space today. Dylan, over to you.
Thanks, Gaynor. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists and attendees who are joining us today. It's great to have so many of you here to discuss this exciting revolution and how its technology is going to impact the continent's minds and the communities that they serve. Bhekadala Digital is a fourth industrial revolution partner to organizations throughout Africa and the Middle East. Our goal is to empower employees throughout the continent with OIR technology. And to do so, we partnered with local experts in specific technologies, such as cloud, technology, Internet of Things, RPA, additive manufacturing, as well as connectivity, to name a few. We work closely with our partners to co-create solutions tailored to your organization's needs to ensure successful transformation. We understand that this revolution is about more than just technology, but rather about data, integration, and ultimately people. We strongly believe that laying a strong foundation in these key areas will drive a successful transformation projects from proof of concept all the way through to fully integrated Business 4.0 solutions. As many of you well know, the mining industry in Africa has faced a challenging past decade, with all levels declining, increased regulation, and rising global competition. Technology presents a brilliant opportunity to help increase efficiencies, create safer working environments, and positively impact the surrounding mining communities. I hope that today provides valuable insight into the impact of these technologies, as well as ways that your organization can begin or improve their digital transformation. I hope that you enjoyed today's webinar, network with fellow industry experts in the chat, and ask valuable questions during the live Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dylan. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. As you'll see when you guys join the session, we have muted everyone. That's not because we don't want to hear from you. It's very important that we hear from you. So please, can you share your feedback with us in the comment blocks, share your questions. We will try to address as many of them at the end of the sessions. We do want this to be two-way. These are discussions. This is all about sharing. It's all about coming together. So, drop whatever crosses your mind throughout the various presentations that you'll see today, and we will start to touch on them at the end of the session. We've got about a half an hour purely dedicated to you, our attendees, to your thoughts and your feedback. So our focus today, as you would have seen up front, is looking at empowering employees. And like Dylan said, Bhekadala is focusing on the people side of technology. So we want to start looking at how does technology impact our people? How do we integrate it into the mining industry specifically? And what are the opportunities out there that we should be leveraging as we go into more of an innovative culture in Africa and build a future for the continent, really. So as you may have experienced, this sector is also one of the sectors that are the most ready for technology to come in and take over and enhance the way that we do things. To share their knowledge with us today, we've got three very exciting panelists. First up, we will hear from Colin Logan. In his role as the Managing Director of Gibb Capital, he focuses on early stage project development and financing of energy and infrastructure projects in Africa and abroad. Colin is currently heading up the internal transformation strategy within Gibb Engineering, and he also provides very practical insights into what makes transformation successful. This sounds amazing. Welcome, Colin.
Thanks, Gaynor. It's very nice to be with you today, and welcome to everybody.
Thanks. And then next up, we'll be hearing from Lerato. He is currently serving as the practice head of mobile and web services at DVT, which is one of Africa's largest development houses. Prior to this position at DVT, he has served on numerous transformational technology projects for Sasol, including leading their automation strategy and their implementation. Thanks for joining us, Lerato.
Thank you, Gaynor, and it's a privilege to be part of this discussion. I'm excited. Thank you.
Then our final panelist of the day will be Deshnee Naidoo. Deshnee brings a wealth of knowledge around the mining transformation strategy and implementation. So her most recent role as CEO of Vedanta Zinc International allowed her to really implement a number of transformational technology projects which really serve the employees and even the communities in the various towns where these mines operate within Southern Africa. So we are looking forward to hearing from Deshnee around some of these implementations. Welcome, Deshnee.
Thank you so much, Gaynor, Dylan, and the team. And I'm really looking forward to learning and engaging with Colin and Lerato too. Thank you.
Perfect. So without further ado, I won't take up too much more of your time. I'm going to hand over to Colin, who's first up, and he has prepared a presentation for us to talk through some of his thinking and the knowledge that he's gathered along the way. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you very much, Gaynor, and once again, welcome to everyone. Going to move to that first slide. Yeah, I mean, I think essentially I'm hoping to share a little bit about you know, some of the research that I've put into this topic myself, having realized that as an organization, engineering organization, multidisciplinary in many respects, that we needed to do something you know, quite profound in this space. So hoping to share some of my experiences there. I've tried to link it a little bit to sort of global research, which supports some of the challenges that we've experienced ourselves. And then, yeah, be very open to a discussion at the end to gain some feedback from all participants for that matter. I think essentially though, if there was nothing else that you took away from my presentation, it would be this quote that I've included as my first slide here. And that is really the key to digital transformation, in my view, is re-envisioning and driving change how the company operates. But that's really essentially a management and people challenge, not just a technology one. If you can go to the next slide. So what are the drivers of digital transformation? I think economic realities. I think we all recognize that business becomes more and more competitive, and we have to find new ways of remaining relevant and to drive and be part of a successful economy. I think societal shifts are also key. I think the way people experience business today and the expectations of the future are also a key driver. How you retain and attract talent is key. So these sort of societal shifts and the customer experience is quite key, and it's something that needs to be addressed through a transformational strategy. And then, of course, underlying this and underpinning this and support of these initiatives is obviously the digital technologies themselves. Go to the next one. So I think the strategy choices in some respects are diminishing. You know, previously we might have been able to consider, you know, do we stay as we are? I'm of the view that we can't. So at two extremes, I would say, and then maybe there are a number of variations of these between these 2 points. One is to be the leader in this, be the disruptor. And at the other end of the spectrum is maybe at least position yourself to change very rapidly and be quite responsive to market forces and market changes. Go to the next one. I mean, so my premise to this is, you know, doing nothing is no longer an option for us. Reasons why I say this is that we're operating in what would be deemed to be a VUCA environment. This is defined by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and a lot of ambiguity. So it's really setting up an organization that can respond to these sort of challenges and is ready at any point in time to kind of change direction. Of course, that is easier said than done. And therefore, it needs a strategy in itself to support, how we sort of take action within the uncertainty that exists, how we react to quickly to ongoing changes within markets, and how we deal with maybe what is somewhat unfamiliar territory in some respects. Okay, if we can move to the next one. I thought I'd include this. This is a McKinsey indicator of what happens when these new trends emerge, and you take your time in trying to respond to these things, or in some respects ignore it. Is that there is definitely there comes a point in time where you reach a tipping point, and you reach a point of no recovery, really. And I mean, it's really incumbent on all companies now to make sure they don't get to that point, because that obviously increases the challenges quite significantly, and it might be too late at that point. Looking at various research I've conducted over the years, there's some thoughts that around 40% of Fortune 500 companies might well not exist within 10 years. I mean, that is quite significant. So we need to take heed of this. At least be aware of it, and respond effectively to these sort of forces. If we can move to the next one. I included this just to look at some of the evolution of organizational performance. It's essentially sort of taking it from the industrial age, how sort of companies viewed themselves at that point, and how we're sort of moving to more of a disruptive thinking, and sort of a focus around sustainability, why we actually do what we do, rather than the what or the how. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but I think these slides will be shared, and please feel free at any point to contact me for any clarity around this. But I just wanted to indicate sort of the evolution of organizational performance. If you can go to the next one. So what is digital transformation? I mean, there's various terminology, and maybe getting the terminology as a starting point is absolutely fundamental. But we looked at sort of digitization at one point, digitalization, and more recently it's about digital transformation. And I really see this as a significant move in terms of where we've come from. But from a digitization point, it was more about products and moving products, or conversion of products to a digital format. In the digitalization side of things, it was exploiting these digital opportunities in some way. Now we're looking more at sort of digital diffusion and operating within a digital ecosystem. And I think that getting that sort of point across is quite important to understand where we're going, and how a company actually positions itself in the broader value chain and ecosystem, and then deciding from a strategic perspective is which part of the value chain or the ecosystem you're wanting to control, but recognizing all these other parties that are quite fundamental to your success in that regard. So I mean, digital transformation for me is about obviously building an agile company, aligning it with company strategy, an organizational design that goes with that, processes that support that sort of thing, and allows employees to succeed in a continuously changing environment. Of course, this is supported by digital tools, but I'm quite adamant that the tools must be seen as sort of the building blocks to delivering on the strategy, rather than the tools driving the strategy. And then I think key again is organizational redesign, and this is fundamentally not an instantaneous thing, but rather a continuous one. So it's about setting a culture within your organization that allows you to continually go through change quite seamlessly. Okay. So culture change for me it's the hardest part of digital transformation. I say that again, a quote at the bottom which I use, which I thought was quite apt, is it's like teaching an elephant to dance. And I think it's very appropriate in this thing. It's challenging to go through this. And dealing with personalities, it's not easy to change an organization's culture. You can go to the next one. Yeah, so what is comprehensive transformation? I mean, I've talked about the people, the processes, technology, the structure that supports this sort of thing. But on the people side, it's about training managers to coach, in my view, rather than direct. Empowering people, absolutely critical. Positioning yourself as an organization to attract the best talent. I mean, you know, people's expectations, the youth, their expectations entering the marketplace. How do we continue to attract that good talent? On the processing side, freeing up teams' time to focus on things that matter, where they should be focusing their attention, rather than some of the peripheral functions that they traditionally sometimes get caught up in and you know, are time consuming. Technology certainly helped to resolve some of those issues. Creating means for collaboration, absolutely fundamental, part of the transformation agenda. Looking at technologies, as I said, an enterprise resource management tools must support the agility. They must not drive the strategy per se, but they're there to support and deliver on the mandate. Okay. And then on the structure side, again, simplification where we can, delayer reporting structures, put the trust in employees at various levels within the organization, and entrench those roles and responsibilities. So I think fundamental for me is kind of streamlining the decision-making process. Okay, if we can go to the next one. Of course, it comes with challenges, as I've pointed out. I've sort of highlighted, this again is on a research base. So these are the kind of things, those companies that are trying to transform, these are the sort of the top challenges that are faced. I think some of them are quite obvious. Sometimes digital transformation is seen as a cost center rather than something that can add value or present you with a sound return on investment. And those are things that have to be presented and articulated to the organization. Of course, huge amounts of resistance, and these are challenges that you have to overcome within an organization. So I won't go through all of them. I've talked about company culture in some respects, but this gives you some of the key challenges, or the top challenges that people would traditionally experience, and I can completely relate to a lot of these. Okay, you can go to the next one. Without going into the details on digital maturity, of course, if you're wanting to set a pathway or the building blocks to deliver on your ultimate goal and where you want to see yourself in the future, you've got to understand where you are at this point. And I think this requires, you know, be honest about where you are, get some advice as to, you know, how you would define the company's digital maturity, and then start building towards your ultimate goal. Okay, I think we can go to the next one. Secrets to success, I mean, the right strategy supported by the right team, again, enabled by the right technology, and then setting the right KPIs, less about inputs, rather more about the outputs. Okay. The next one, please, Dylan. Transformational agenda, you're wanting to build resilience within your organization. That's, you know, supporting the sort of cash flows and reserves within the organization, which allows one to, you know, sort of stay in the game for longer, moving towards optionality. So being open-minded about the approaches, which then allows one to sort of evolve reasoning and make mid-course adjustments when required. And then once you've decided on what changes need to be made, is to really move quickly towards implementation. Okay, next one. So the transformational roadmap, of course, it's supported by a lot of detail, but this is in essence, I've sort of split it up into 3 phases. The first one is acceptance, informing and secure company-wide support, then sort of testing, creating the test projects, and cultivate a digital culture, and then moving towards actual transformation and sequencing of initiatives for rapid returns to show progress. If we can go to the next one then. I think, and then, I mean, this is at the core of this is, have you got the right team in place? From the CEO of the organization, you know, all the way down to all levels of the organization. Have you got the right champions behind you? Or have you got financial analysts that are supporting the initiatives, et cetera, et cetera? That in essence brings me to the end of my presentation, and I hope that it's at least given an indication of some of the challenges and what would go into a process like this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Colin. I think that was, there's some wonderful insights there in terms of what we should be considering when we're implementing these strategies, as well as you know, some of the tools that we have in our toolbox when trying to achieve that. So thanks for that. Lerato, let's hand over to you and see what you've got to share with us today.
Thanks, Gain. I really appreciate that. And Colin, thanks for those insights. I learned quite a bit from that. Thank you. I'm sure we'll engage later on that. Yeah. So Dylan, if you don't mind, just starting the slideshow. Yeah, so I think, you know, in essence, I think we all know that, you know, throughout humankind history, there's been a lot of interaction or a lot of dependency on mining. So if you look at, you know, since the Stone Age up until where we are, we've relied a lot on mining. You know, you can think of products like toothpaste, smart cars that are coming out today, cell phones. I mean, it's an interesting fact that the average smartphone today contains over 60 elements. I mean, who knew that? And all of these are coming from the mining industry. So I think it's safe to say that the mining industry is here to stay. The mining industry is here to help us progress as human beings. I mean, they've helped us come this far. So there's a lot that can still be done within mining. And I think, you know, with the introduction of the fourth industrial revolution, mining has got the opportunity to actually push the boundaries of technology, to actually, you know, what's the word I'm looking for, you know, with automation, with some of the technologies that can be implemented, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Mining has the opportunity to really catapult human improvement and that the potential that human beings have to innovate and to come up with exciting and new products and really spear us into the future. So go into the next slide, Dylan. So that being said, I think mining does have its own challenges. And I'm sure those of you that are in the mining industry will appreciate this as well. So when it comes to health and safety, we all know that this is one of the key things when it comes to mining. It's one of the major KPIs. According to the stats, I think from last year, 2019, the death toll in mining came down. I think there were about 51 fatalities. Again, this is good because fatalities came down drastically, but it's still not good in that, you know, one fatality is one too many. So we are still faced with the challenge of fatalities. Nobody wants to lose a life. You know, we work with people, people have got families, there are breadwinners. We like these people to go back to their families and still continue to lead their homes and be part of a community and so on. And so how do we actually bring down the fatalities? How do we bring down the injuries? Again, a lot of these things have got indirect impact or direct cost impact to mining companies. I mean, if you think about the benefits that need to be paid out in case of injuries or fatalities and so on, if you think about the overtime that is actually spent by workers trying to make up for the lost employee or the lost time that another employee could be putting in, if you think about the administrative costs that go in there, you know, the safety personnel, the people that have to clean up, the property damage and all of those things add up in the mine. And again, this remains a challenge, health and safety. But again, I think technology has a role to play here to help us to overcome this. There's also the environmental impact or challenge that mining industries have. You think about the impact on biodiversity, you know, like the pollution that happens with the surface water or the underground water, other adverse effects that happen to the environment, you know, to plants and the life that lives in their environment and so on. That has an impact on human beings. We've only got one planet, we've got one Earth, so we need to really look after it. So yes, mining is great, but how do we do responsible mining, and how do we mine these products without actually, you know, impacting the environment so much? If you look at productivity, I know that it's often said that productivity is a CEO problem. Yes, it is a CEO problem, but I think, you know, technology can actually assist us in helping increase productivity. I think, you know, if you think about unplanned downtime within the mines, within the plants and so on, some of these things can be avoided if we implement the right sort of technology. Needless to say, it is a challenge in the mining industry. How do you run your operations more efficiently? It's one of those things that mining companies do still battle with. Let's move on to the next one, Dylan. So yeah, so given those challenges, I believe that, you know, technology, digital solutions have got the power to actually help us overcome some of these challenges. So there are a number of technologies that one can consider when it comes to improving your operations on the mine, when it comes to addressing health and safety concerns, when it comes to the environmental impact. I mean, you think about mobile solutions within health and safety. I can think of, like safety apps that people can actually start developing and deploying to their staff to help them, teach them about safety and keep them safe, when it comes to mining and how to go about it safely. You can think about sensors. So if you think about IoT, industrial Internet of Things, that can be implemented within the mine. Think about wearables for workers that are underground at all times. You know where the workers are. You're able to see what the workers are doing. You're able to warn them about, things that might not be safe or unsafe behavior that they might be participating in. Those things can go a long way into helping to improve the health and safety of workers. There are certain jobs and things that are still dangerous to human beings. So if we think about automation, we think about robotics, how do we utilize robotics to help us, in terms of keeping human beings alive? Maybe you can deploy a robot together with a human being, and the robot can do other things that humans might not be able to do because it's a little bit too dangerous. Things like drones or UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, can go and assess the environment and bring back safety reports. You can monitor safety remotely and so on. Those are some of the practical solutions that can be implemented. When it comes to the environment, again, you think about the sensors that can give us feedback and information on how the biodiversity is doing. So if at any point we realize that things are not going so well, I mean, we can take corrective action, but we don't have to be always reactive. We can always be proactive as well. And sensors will be able to give us the data that we need in order for us to become proactive in saving their environment. Again, analytics, big data, those are very important in helping us understand and analyze, how the environment is changing over time. Very important. Again, drones can be utilized here. And I think blockchain is also an interesting one as well. If you think about, the consumer that's going to be consuming your end product, it will be very nice for them, to actually see where the product actually comes from and how it's made its way throughout the value chain to end up on their lap or on their wrist or whatever the product might be. So that's also a very, very good one. That will actually revolutionize our systems of verification work and their traceability of certain elements and so forth. When it comes to productivity, I know that a lot of companies have actually implemented cloud technologies, which is really great, especially mining companies that do have operations internationally. It just makes sense for them to have cloud systems in place so that they're able to coordinate their operations over a number of countries and over a number of sites and so on. So that's been one technology that has worked quite well for the mines. Again, cloud technology also introduces cybersecurity as well. We all know that, with fourth industrial revolution, with all of these technologies, wearables, mobile devices, and so on, bring your own device policies and so forth, cybersecurity becomes something that is very important that organizations need to consider. So again, with the fourth industrial revolution, cybersecurity plays a key role. Analytics, again, the CEO that's worried about productivity, if they have the right data, they have the right insights into the data, they're able to make more informed decisions, empowered decisions that will be able to help them make better decisions for their organization. If you think about 3D modeling or 3D printing, additive manufacturing and so on, again, you're able to bypass supply chain processes. And again, I'm not saying, doing anything that is against company policy. What I'm trying to say is that, if you're able to print your own parts, your own components and so on, it's actually going to save you a lot of time rather than having to go through the entire supply chain process. You can actually manufacture your own components, your own parts, thereby speeding up your delivery and your manufacturing and so forth. So 3D modeling, 3D printing gives you that ability. So that's another one that really excites me when it comes to some of these technologies that are implemented in the mining industry. Dylan, let's go to the next slide. So that being said, if you think about all of these technologies that one can implement, again, these are just technologies. People at the end of the day need to make decisions. They need to come up with a roadmap of how they're going to address some of the challenges within the mine and how they're going to use some of these technologies to address some of these challenges. And I've found, through my own experience, through other case studies, that there are certain barriers to successful implementations of these technologies, or to your transformation that you're looking at as an organization. Leadership style is one of the ones that really stick out. So when there's a lack of vision from the leadership, often things fall apart. Dr. what's his name, Maxwell, often says, everything rises and falls on leadership. So if the leadership doesn't have any vision for the organization, things are generally not going to work as well as they should be. Insufficient sponsorship is another one. And I think, Colin, you also mentioned something along cash flow reserves and building those things up. If there isn't sufficient sponsorship from the top, and if there isn't sufficient budget that is put aside for these things, then again, this is going to become a barrier to your success. With a lot of mining companies, manufacturing companies, you find that there's a lot of legacy culture that comes with it. Again, this can hold the company back. Again, mindset is another one that also, slows down the rate of transformation. Companies need to adopt the right mindset. You can't always rely on traditional business models. Often there's no drive for the organization to change. And again, that's going to bring about a barrier for you. Silos, again, is something that also, reinforces organizational barriers, because if people operate in silos, there is very little collaboration. Traditional management layers maintain and protect these silos, and we need to do away with these silos and think about products, teams, as opposed to having these silos that operate individually. Dylan, let's go to the next one. So if you think about, the keys to success in terms of your digital strategy and implementing all of these technologies and transforming your organization, I think one of the ones that really stick out is better ways of working. So companies need to adopt new ways of working. A lot of companies have adopted agile ways of work. This has proven to be quite beneficial for organizations. They're able to move a lot quicker. But again, you find that with mining companies, manufacturing companies, they still work in silos. So you might find that other teams still work using waterfall approach, some work in an agile manner. This creates a dependency and it still slows down progress and so on. But if the entire organization can move to agile ways of working and aligning their deliveries and their dependencies, that's going to bring about a great success in terms of your strategy. Again, DevOps, DevSecOps, some refer to BizDevOps, business development and operations. That's also another strategy that one can implement. If you think about DevOps and you think about the 3 ways of work within manufacturing, the first thing is you want to increase your flow. How do we take an idea or a product idea? How do we quickly develop that and make sure that it ends up in the customer's hands very quickly? What are the things that we need to automate? What are the things that we need to move out of the way? So that speaks to flow, and then the feedback loop that needs to be built into that as well, and the continuous learning and improvement and so on that is baked into that. Adaptive funding models. Often, when it comes to transformational strategies, I found that people are often reluctant, or leadership is reluctant to sponsor projects where they do not actually see value instantly, and so they tend to hold back in terms of their funding. So we need to actually overcome that and find ways to fund these initiatives and so on. Speed to market. We need to decentralize decision making, empower teams. You don't want somebody to have to go through 10 layers of authorization in order to get a simple, go ahead to do something. If you can empower teams, they can move a lot quicker because they don't have to go through all of these layers. If you decentralize decision making, empower your management layer to make certain decisions, there doesn't have to be any bottlenecks in terms of having to wait for the CEO or the leadership to make certain decisions that can be made lower down. Again, there is room to always automate stuff. So find opportunities where you can automate things in order for you to be able to move quickly through the market. And I think my last point, communication and collaboration, is also a key one as well. So every part of the business, IT, operations, external partners, everybody needs to come together and work together towards a common vision. Again, if you look at the entire organization, if the person that is mining going underground and actually extracting the product doesn't understand the vision or doesn't understand the company strategy, there's going to be very little buy-in. But if everybody from the top right down to the very last person, you know, that actually extracts a product, understands the vision and understands the strategy, and there is buy-in all the way, then you'll find that, you know, that can actually help you in terms of adopting this transformation and giving you success in that. Thank you, Dylan.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Lerato. I love how much you touched on the people side of technology, because that's really why we are here, you know. I think there's a really good segue there into Deshnee's presentation, and then we'll hit some questions after that. Deshnee, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Gaino. And yeah, Dylan, if we can just stay, okay, let's start there. I just want to start by giving a bit of a background. So firstly, I'd like to thank Bhekadala again, and just by listening to Lerato and Colin, there's a lot in what you said that I resonated with, so I'm going to try and just skim through some of that. I want to start by just thanking Gargi Mishra, a friend and a colleague who's actually the regional head at Hatch for Mining 4.0, for her contribution to some of the content that I'm about to share with you. Before we get into the content, I just want to give some context about the South African mining industry. You know, the South African mining industry really matters. And why? Because, you know, with over 380 mines directly employing over 450,000 people, just over 12% of them being women, and in 2019, you know, having contributed about 8% towards the GDP of this country, and having invested over 95 billion rands worth of direct investment, it certainly matters and has a role to play in South Africa's recovery and growth that is much needed. Yet South African mining, as some of my colleagues have already touched on, is in structural decline since 2010. Since 2010, we've seen the industry losing 10% of its output. We've seen the industry losing over 50,000 jobs, and has declined in capital expenditure by over 45%. With 50% of the current output now at the bottom half of the industry cost curve, South African mining is actually declining in competitiveness. And we know why, right? Electricity supply constraints, logistical bottlenecks, regulatory uncertainty, escalation of geological factors, and that is the deepening of mines, lower grades, aging infrastructure, etc., as well as the increase in license to operate. And these are just some of the main factors. So this, plus COVID-19, has definitely heightened the urgency to fix mining and better set it up on a sustainable path. The work that was recently done by Business for South Africa highlighted 7 priority action areas that need to be addressed. That includes regulatory reform, industry modernization, reliable energy supply, infrastructure development, community investment, exploration strategy, and a government and industry task force just to drive this. Technology, whilst most appropriately sits in the industry modernization bucket, actually cuts across all of the action areas. So I see technology in mining, largely on innovation and digitalization, as a key enabler for mining's growth and sustainability. Technology, however, is not people agnostic. I think, as we've just heard, just the complete opposite. Technology requires people adoption. And if mining requires technology to thrive, then we need to involve and empower all stakeholders, not just employees, to unlock this. Can we go to the next slide, Dylan? It's a very busy slide, but I know that both Lerato and Colin touched on some of this. So what is 4IR in mining today? You know, 4IR is being applied across the mining value chain today. Until a few years ago, we saw bespoke technology was being applied, retrofitted to just isolated areas, you know, yielding ring-fenced benefits. Today, we are integrating across the value chain to enable more reliability, efficiency, and hence increased value addition, but the sum of the parts giving us a lot more today. Data analytics, Internet of Things, AI are all contributing to this. This gives us what I call the Operations Performance Management System, the OPM. The game changer now and the next level of integration is integrating the enabling function systems to this. Integrating safety systems, already largely digitized, should be the first step. Step 2, and Gaynor would love this, should be people system. So integrating recruitment, onboarding, training, and admin. What is the 4IR business case? To arrest the structural decline I spoke about and make mining, like Lerato mentioned, safer, more sustainable, and hence more competitive. We can, using the technologies that are developed and are evolving, accelerate exploration, mine previously unsafe areas remotely, reduce wastage, improve recoveries, improve product qualities, improve equipment reliabilities, accelerate rehabilitation and restoration, increase leading indicator focus, not just on safety, but across the value chain, have real-time assurance. I think, and that is one way of actually cutting the bureaucracy, is why can't assurances be done real-time? Improve person-to-person connectivity, engagement. We spoke about wearables, but there's a lot we can do to make sure that people stay more connected today. Develop more efficient operating models, because you can't change the hard wiring of the organization without changing the way the operation works. This is the case for change, and why we need all stakeholders sharing and owning in this vision, and hence purpose for the sector. When we built the Greenfields Hamsburg project, which is the mine behind me, this was phase 1. It's a 4 million ton run of mine operation, and will produce 250,000 tons of metal in concentrate, making it the largest single stream zinc plant in the world and one of 5 largest zinc operations globally. And fantastic to know that it sits in Kaima in the Northern Cape. We built a fully digitalized mine. We integrated the planning systems, and that was through the enterprise systems of Mine RP and the GE CAS system, which is the collision awareness system, to give us integrated spatial data, which when combined with the 8-finger stockpile grade model and blending management recipe, allowed us to predict, using a digital twin, to predict the product quality. And that is incredibly important. Why? Because we know that products, that have certain impurities in it will attract penalties. So this was, plus the advanced process control we had on the plant, was actually what we call the Hamsburg Operations Performance Management. Can I go to the next slide, Dylan? So there have been a few implementations of 4IR projects in mining of varying scopes in the last 5 years, and my colleagues have touched on it. So I'm just going to go to just some of the high level points, right? So critical success factors for me would be, projects are not designed and executed in isolation. It has to be totally integrated. Understand the company baseline, including maturity, and translate the vision to an execution roadmap. And I think this is where the tone from the top comes. And again, when I was CEO of Vedanta Zinc International, it wasn't something I spoke about in a bespoke way on the side of the business. Technology, digitalization, as with safety, as with the rest of the operating parameters, were always integrated at all times. The goals, the case for change, have to be co-created with the internal team, and then socialized with all stakeholders. I think, and in this process, the fear of technology, which is something we must address, and the fear of the unknown essentially has to be taken care of in that process. Not only are these projects implemented using agile technologies, as we just heard from Lerato, but the process and change management must actually be used to sensitize the business to a culture that does become more agile, innovative, because that's what you need the technology to drive. Given this evolving space, it's also as important to make sure that we have the right partners. I was very, specific when I was a CEO that I was never going to build a team that went out and found the right technologies, because by the time that team was built, the technologies would have been updated. I needed to partner with people that constantly told me what was in the evolving space so that we can adopt as they inform. I think the foundational measures that I've mentioned there really iterate some of this. I just love the cartoon, and hence I put it in. I think very much, to all the naysayers out there that basically thought, not a problem, we'll wait. And I think Colin mentioned it as well. We'll wait, it's here. If there's one positive coming out of COVID, it's showing us that digital transformation does not need to take time. Out of necessity, we are basically doing a lot of what we thought we would do in years to come. The next slide, please, Dylan. So I also want to say, starting off with the Hamsburg mine digitalization from scratch, we underestimated the management of change component, thinking that this was a greenfields project and hence not required to the extent of an existing mine site implementation. This was indeed an oversight on the project. It doesn't mean that we couldn't learn and adapt fast enough, but definitely an oversight. The project was greenfields, and I think, and this is key, but the mindsets of the people on site were not. They still had some of the legacy mindsets and what I used to call the when-we's. So we extended the PIT Wi-Fi network to the region, because we needed PIT Wi-Fi for the site, and we extended it to the region as one of our CSR projects, which was an amazing project. This basically went around the entire Kaima area. But again, in hindsight, this should have been implemented as one of the pre-start activities earlier on, and then used to train local community members far earlier than we did for the jobs that the digital mine needed, as well as the technology advanced plant that the Hamsburg plant was. So when we reimagine mining, which everyone is talking about, we have to reimagine what the future workforce and what the future work will look like, both in terms of design, which is the blueprint, but as well as catering for some of the evolution in the space. A 2018 WEF, a Future of Jobs report, which mainly interviewed CHROs, revealed that they were expecting workforce impacts of somewhere between 20 to 70%, as you can see on the chart. This is sufficient evidence to substantiate why employees would have to be at the center of any successful transformation project. In terms of the key actions, in addition to reskilling current workforce and making them future ready for the technology that we are about to adopt, as well as making sure that they co-create some of that, skilling the future workforce is important. As important, and I mentioned with the communities around the Hamsburg project, but equally important is redesigning the KPIs accordingly. What is measured, as we all know, gets delivered, and will certainly go a long way towards creating that required culture that the technology needs. Dylan, the next slide. It's a very busy slide. A lot of this has been touched. I'm just going to summarize. So the lessons, and now better known, give us an opportunity to create differentiated success in implementation. Tailored change management, as we discussed, is key. And I use the word tailored because it has to be matched to what the maturity within the organization is. Change agents or champions are catalysts and must be carefully selected. I always like using detractors and converting them to become those change champions. Co-creating the solution, aligning it with the organization maturity, as I said, effective communication, the case for change, especially, what's in it for the end user and the adopter as the basis to demystify technology is key. Only follow training after a few iterations of that communication. Let the message soak in. Redesign the organization model in terms of meeting cadence, governance, delegation of authority, and align the KPIs based on new levels of work accordingly. Cannot have the same organization doing the same old work, but using different tools. You've got to rewire the entire organization against that vision that you've all just adopted. I think important as well is as the work starts to evolve, we must also start to ready ourselves both mentally as well as from an integration point of view, to embrace and integrate the new digital co-workers. So we all talk about the role of people, but the operating model that I'm talking about must be one that is co-designed, knowing that you will have digital co-workers as part of this. And in conclusion, and I'd like to end on the next slide, please, Dylan, the Alvin Toffler quote, one of my favorites. You know, mining is pivotal to South Africa's economy. Mining has been in structural decline since 2010. Technology modernization, as I've said, is a key lever to making mining safer, more sustainable, and more competitive. And by the way, Lerato, productivity is not a CEO's problem, it's a business problem. The nature of work in mining will change, evolve to adapt to the mine of the future. The dream is a compelling one, as it is driven by value. And I think that's something people don't often connect. This is a value-based decision. All key stakeholders need to be taken along to share in the common vision and purpose and own their share of actions to unlock this. Employees, as well as the contract business partners, are at the center of this and need to co-create this change in work and will be trained and reskilled to deliver it. We need to prevent future illiteracy, and that's what we are striving to do. And the last slide that needs no comments because it is so apparent is that the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And that was Socrates many centuries ago. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Deshnee. That was a good end off there, because while you were talking, I was literally just taking notes down on, you know, how do businesses start to manage the fears of the individual at the end of the day and their personal experience at work? How do we get them ready? You know, and, you know, when we talk to improving productivity, how do we sort of help in the experience and position innovation as an opportunity for an individual? So I think you've really helped us to understand what businesses can be doing in those areas to assist. We have prepped a question for each of you, and then we're going to dive into some of the questions that our attendees have dropped in the box. So if you are listening in and you have questions, please can you remember to drop them into the Q&A box so that we can address them before we end the session. So the first question, Colin, this one is for you. What we would like to just touch on is the fact that technology does have an impact on workers and processes, but how do we start to work with all the stakeholders in the chain of adoption to ensure that they actually understand the value and embrace, you know, what is changing in the environment and what it means for them at the end of the day? Just to the other panelists, you're most welcome to answer as well. Jump in if you would like to also just share something on this question. But to Colin.
Well, thanks for the question, Gaynor. I think that the message has been clear in all three presentations. So, but in essence, start off by educating and informing. So that way everybody knows what the objectives are and what we're seeking as an outcome. I would say secondly is consult widely and encourage the collaboration at all levels within the organization. You'll be amazed at what sort of ideas come out at every level of an organization. And you can start to join the dots that way and identify what those big wins are, because the sooner you show some level of improvement, the quicker the buy-in, and it has a snowball effect. And then I think a key thing for me is also transparency in execution. So don't be scared to fail, accept those failures, but learn very quickly from them. And if there's no transparency around that, and it's not sort of filtering through the organization, we then repeat those mistakes. So I think those are three things I would advocate at this point. Yeah.
Cool. Deshnee, Lerato, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
You know, I think we're good because, as Colin said, a lot of this we actually reiterated within the presentations.
Okay, then for Lerato, we've got a question for you. So in which areas of transformational technology do you believe the industry is progressing? So what is looking good in the industry, and where are the opportunities to improve within the industry, and also to help the continent to be competitive against global players in mining?
Thank you for the question, Gaynor. So there are a number of transformational technologies that I feel, the mining industry is really doing well in. So if you think about drone technology, that's been utilized quite well in terms of, site inspections, improving health and safety of employees. You think about RPA technology, automating certain processes within the business and so on. There's been quite a good uptake of that, and that has yielded some good results there. Industrial Internet of Things, where they are, incorporating sensors into their production, into their machinery, and getting all sorts of data and collating that data and making informed decisions on that. Where I still see certain gaps is in the space of additive manufacturing or 3D printing. That is something that is really growing, but I feel like, in order for us to compete internationally, globally, we'd need to really increase the uptake of that. So where that gives you an advantage is, obviously, I think I touched on it in my presentation earlier.
Oh, seem to have lost you, Lerato.
Okay, now can I just add something there on the transformational technology? It's not so much in the hardware. I think there's a lot more work to be done on the integration, and I see the transformational part of this becoming the integration, as I mentioned, to enabling services systems. So something that I'm seeing a trend of, and I'd like to see more in this is, there's such a big push, rightly so, in the industry for ESG. I think there's so much more we can do from a governance and an assurance point of view to make sure that the data is available on an online real-time basis. So instead of mining companies becoming defensive as to what they did do on environment, social, and governance, we can start to make the data available real-time online. I think that could be a game changer. So we must stop thinking about transformational technologies in terms of hardware and start thinking about the value in integration in this space.
Thanks.
Hi, Gaynor.
You can carry on.
Yeah, I think Deshnee touched on one of the things I wanted to touch on, and that is with regards to data and analytics. So with that, I think machine learning is one of those things that we really need to adopt as well. So if you think about the data, we've got so much data that we process, and also the structure of that data. How do we gather data intelligently and structure it in such a way that we're able to build machine learning models on that data, in order to be able to enable minds to learn and to adapt quickly, for the future. There are great insights in that data, but how do we actually build the right models that can learn from that data and provide us with those valuable insights? Again, with machine learning comes artificial intelligence again. That is something that can really help, the leadership within the company in terms of, coming alongside them, looking at the data and start to analyze that data and start to help them in terms of their decision making and optimizing their processes and so forth. So artificial intelligence with machine learning, additive manufacturing, I think I mentioned when I got cut off. Those are some of the technologies that I think, we could start adopting more of.
Gaynor, if I could also maybe add to the conversation a little bit. I mean, for me, I think it's key to understand that there are a lot of technologies out there that can support business. What's important is to really understand what your business imperatives are and where the pinch points are. I think a lot of companies in the past have made sort of fallen into the trap of going out there and spending money on all these technologies and not necessarily yielding the results that you want. I mean, I think in terms of practical solutions, maybe we can direct you to the oil and gas industry in the recent past. They were forced to rethink things just because the oil price slumped to a level which they needed to rethink how they operate. And many of them have turned to digital transformation as a solution for that. So if you're looking for, practical implementation of something like this, you can really sort of take a lot from some of the oil and gas companies that have had to respond to a very different pricing structure.
Deshnee, can we move over to your question? So you spoke a little bit about communities and how with Vedanta, the changes and transformation started to impact, those around the actual mine itself. So how important do you think it is that those operations commit to helping the communities that they impact and the communities that serve them every single day?
Simply put, very important. In fact, it is for me a critical success factor to the mine's digital transformation. Mine is not an island, and we have touched on it. I see it as an anchor within the ecosystem. It plays a very, very important role. So like all stakeholders, communities absolutely have to be taken along on this journey. They need to be technologically and digitally empowered. And I think that's something that I saw firsthand with, implementing the community Wi-Fi. That's what that Wi-Fi project did, is digitally empower the surrounding communities to be able to not just work at the mine site, which is important. And I think, and if nothing else, that should be the driver here. If you're going to be building the mine of the future that's very digitally transformed, well, how can your community not be transformed similarly or even ahead of the curve so that the community can support the mine better? But that's just the one side of it. Many mines, and something again I did at Vedanta, is start to focus on what we call the beyond mining initiatives, because we all know mining has got a definite life of mine. And the job of the mining company is not just to make money and to run projects that benefit the mine for when it's in production, but to make sure that there is an ecosystem that will survive beyond the mine. And one of the projects we did there as part of CSR was something called the Broad-Based Livelihood Project, which basically encouraged every community member to have a sustainable garden in their backyard, which is fantastic. And I think of some of the COVID challenges now. I wish the rest of South Africa had got into that bandwagon sooner. But this is how technology played a part. Because the community already had Wi-Fi, a very lean team came in to support the communities to actually plant these gardens, and then gave them an app. So if your garden didn't look in a certain way, you then took a picture of whatever was happening and you sent it to the team that was sitting in Johannesburg, and they gave you remote assistance. How fantastic. And that was just one project. So there's something about supporting communities to make sure that they can work and support these technologically advanced mining operations of the future. Then they must benefit from what I'm calling the beyond mining type CSR programs. I think, and for me, that will be real success when communities don't need mining companies in order to thrive. And lastly, I think they must advance in their personal lives too. And we all understand, just the social inequalities within South Africa. Digital has such a role to play in trying to close that gap. So simply put, again, I think we need to forge partnerships with the communities to co-create not just what the mine within the mine fence needs to do when it comes to digital transformation and technology, but to support the entire ecosystem as I have just described it. This is something I feel very passionate about. And like I mentioned, it is the critical success factor for mining digital transformation.
Absolutely, Deshnee. And I think also, within those communities, quite often, the children of the miners are your future employees. And so I also jotted down a note earlier, around whose responsibility is it really to build future fit people. And when you talk about future fit to run a digital mine, you're actually talking about the children of the miners on the property at the moment. So your span of control and influence within the community is very important so that you have a constant stream of employees coming in from the surrounds and they're ready to operate in a digital mine. Yeah.
And if I can add just more bit, again, I think, and Deshnee, I think another important stakeholder here is obviously government. You know, if you think about the Department of Education and you think about the curriculum that is being taught in schools, I mean, mining companies do know exactly what their requirements are. They know where they're wanting to go. And in terms of digitally being transformed and so on, the technologies that are involved there. So how do we go back to the schools and ensure that the curriculum aligns accordingly, you know, that we start teaching the kids the right skills from the onset early on in school. Yeah, so I think government also needs to come to the party, and mining companies have a huge role to play in partnering up with our government to ensure that our curriculum is also transformed.
100%. Colin, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, Gaynor, just to, you know, I think it's maybe repeating a little bit of what was said, but, you know, I don't see CSR in the future as a philanthropic type of initiative anymore. I see it as moving into a space which it's a value creating opportunity for any entity and large corporation operating in a community. And it's how you sort of develop those skills at a very early stage. We talked about educating, informing, developing a culture which will best serve these sort of organizations in the future. Now those are seeds you've got to plant very early on in the process.
Okay, I'm going to jump into some questions so that we can answer them in the next 20 minutes or so. We've got quite an interesting question here from Sabelo. And I will speak as a supplier in tech to mining as well. So Sabelo is asking how many technology solution, or how can technology solution providers begin conversations with the industry? So quite often in the tech space and innovation, we would have a product and then kind of approach a client or the mine and say, this is what we have, let's make it work for you. How can we better have that conversation so that it is a relationship of co-creation, of solution, you know, development, problem solving? What do you think works in your experience in the way that a supplier approaches you in the tech space?
I think from my side, Gaynor and Sabelo, you definitely need to understand what the client's KPIs are. I think that's number one. So once you understand what the KPIs are, I think it puts you in a better position to have the right conversations with the clients. And I find what also works well is you know, just trying to communicate the value that they can gain out of working together with you. So one of the things that I found worked really well in the past with you know, service providers that I've engaged with is if a service provider comes to me and they already have some sort of POC in mind. So they've understood what my KPIs are, they've understood my vision for where I'm trying to go, and they've come alongside and they've said, look, you know, here's a proof of concept that we've done to address a certain problem or issue that you have, and this is how you can meet your KPI. Using a solution that we've actually, you know, created a POC on. So I find that, you know, that works a lot better. So have some sort of a POC on the table, understand the KPIs and communicate the value that you offer to the prospective client.
Thanks,
just to add on, sorry, Gaynor, just to add on that, I think, you know, we understand mining companies are still largely risk averse. So it's important that, you know, by the time the solution comes to us or we asked for an audience, that there is something in the industry as to what's happening, how this particular piece of technology works. So I'd also encourage to go to like the Minerals Council, you know, look at some of the industry bodies as well, so that by the time the message hits the mining company, you know, we have seen it or heard from it in other forums as well. Similarly, you know, approach some of the universities, something we didn't speak about, but there's a lot of really good work happening in the space, you know, from the Mandela Precinct project to the university digital labs to what, you know, the Minerals Council is actually doing outside of the great work that the individual mining companies are doing. So just understand your target audience in mining a little bit better, understand the risk aversity, and then try and tailor the approach accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also to add to the conversation a little bit is, you know, I think listening is really important. I think early on, again, you talked about finding Africa solutions for African problems. So identifying what the true problem is key. You know, sometimes these technologies are developed in a very different kind of environment and can be tailored to these sort of solutions, but without listening to what the problem is, it's very difficult to then solve the problem.
Here's a really good question from Kamal Mystery. He is asking, how does one make a case for investment in digital? And this actually links back to another question from Kevin asking, how should companies start investing in the space, you know, and start to anticipate some of the capital outlay related to the implementation of technology? And I think this question is very much in your space, Colin, but open for anyone to answer.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for the question. I think it is key. I did allude to it a little bit in my presentation, but I think as a start, piloting some of these things is key. So you can have the large ideas are all well and good, but it's good to start thinking about what the potential returns are. And I don't advocate that any investment is made in digital transformation until you have at least thought about what the expected returns are. What I do sort of advise people against is don't try and solve that very large problem with a huge investment. Test it through and do it through various building blocks. And if you see that the trajectory or the trend is not moving in the right direction, that's when you've got to make a very strong decision to then change trajectory, move to a different solution. And don't be scared to do that, because otherwise it's more bad one. Well, it's putting money into a bit of a black hole. So, but I do believe that if you've clearly thought out these sort of processes and you're measuring it effectively through the process, you should be able to demonstrate a case for investment.
Thanks so much for that, Colin. I think it's quite aligned with the message around, you know, needing to be quite agile when you're bringing some of these technologies in. So quite often businesses will bring the tech in and they will make it work because that is what they scoped, and keep, you know, running down the same road regardless of what's happening along the way. So I think being able to iterate and be flexible along the way is definitely one of the key factors.
Sorry, Gaynor, on that, as much as I agree that, you know, this needs to be measured in some way, I'm also going to say that there should be a small portion of the capital going to a bit of R&D in the space as well. We do need to take risk. If you know, it's good to pilot, but if you don't take the risk, we will never know. So it is a little bit of a combination strategy. I would advocate doing both. R&D type risk, capital minimal, and being agile in knowing when to stop it, but don't stop trying, because you know, don't let not having the evidence of success derail trying.
Perfect, thanks, Deshnee. Just another question around the measurement of return on investment, because we talk about, you know, the return on investment, but how do we measure in very different environments when there are different factors which impact or which are impacted by the technology at the end of the day? What, in all of your opinions, do you think is a good metric to measure the return on investment for some of the implementation?
I'm not sure that there's one answer to that. You know, I talked about what are your sort of business imperatives, you know, and that's unique to every business. And I don't think that it would be common across all businesses. So that's really, I leave that down to interrogating it very carefully within your organization, understanding what it is, and then developing metrics against those and how you're going to solve those problems, you know. And the technology will be there, identifying a technology as an enabler to deliver on whatever that objective is and to solve that particular problem. So I don't think there's a simple answer to that one.
Yeah, and I think from my side, I mean, one of the key things here is the client, right? The consumer at the end of the day. And we need to be very much client-centric. So I mean, you can measure in terms of the value that you are providing to the client. I mean, if your client is happy and your client increases their sales with you. I think that's one of the things that can show you that there's actually value in terms of what you're doing. So I think we shouldn't forget at the end of the day that we need to be very much client focused. Yes, it's important to focus on operational efficiencies and all of those things, but at the end of the day, I think let's also measure what we deliver to the client and what impact that has at the end of the value chain.
And I can also just maybe go back to the question, maybe to add an idea that the metric could change. You want to drive certain behavior. I think someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Deshnee that said that, you want to drive certain behavior. Now, the metrics that inform that or inspire that might change with time. So, there might not be one metric to how you achieve your goal at the end of the day.
I think just the final comment on this one is from a mining company perspective. The mining company or individual mining company needs to draw up their own guidelines for how to get investment decisions regarding technology over the line. It might be different because at the end of the day, we do report into boards and we have committees, etc., to satisfy. So I'm just going to simply say each mining company should derive their own guidelines for how they get technology investments over the line versus the traditional capital investments regarding replacement growth type projects. It is different. Think about how you want to sell it within the company and make sure, to Colin's point, that you do have the right metrics at the right time to measure your success and that you are nimble or agile enough to change either the approach or change the metric as the project evolves. This is not your traditional investment proposal type problem that we're solving.
Thanks, Deshnee. I think this is the last question we're going to tackle, but it's quite interesting. So Viren Naidoo has kind of asked around the perception and the promise of digital and tech lowering the cost of mining production. That is what it says it does. We're going to reskill, upskill, and protect the jobs of our communities while bringing the technology in at the same time. And so his question is really around when the shareholders and investors are really looking for returns and lowering the cost of production, how can we then maintain the jobs and what we are promising on the other hand? Because they are conflicting views. I think that's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stay upfront that Viren Naidoo is my significant other half, so I'm not conflicted. I'm gonna answer the question.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'm just telling him he sounds like a trade unionist, but we won't have that conversation. So, we've discussed this ad nauseum, and I think, when I spoke about the greatest stakeholder ecosystem, Lerato mentioned government, I mentioned communities, employees, contract business partners, etc. A very important stakeholder is also unions, right? Because this is the threat. We all know that, although mining is far more ready than most sectors, especially in South Africa now for change regarding digital transformation, but it's still being seen as a threat to future jobs. So I mentioned something in my presentation regarding, blueprinting, kind of what the future of mining would look like, and then what the future nature of work would look like. So I am quite confident that the jobs won't necessarily reduce, but that the nature of the work will change. And until we've done that work, we shouldn't be scared of the unknown and hence the possible consequence of there not being sufficient work to stop it. So simply put, I'm saying the nature of work will change. Let's do that exercise. Let's then work back. I mentioned it in my presentation as well, that by using technology, we will definitely extend the life of mines because we'll be able to mine lower grade areas. We'll be able to mine areas that were not previously safe to mine, and hence we can do it remotely. A remote piece of kit needs someone to look at it. A remote piece of kit with remote technology needs a different type of IT infrastructure, monitoring thereof, cybersecurity to look after that. So let's start reimagining the nature of work, and let that inform the decision and not the threat of job losses.
Thanks, Deshnee. That's a great answer. Colin, Lerato, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think we also need to be cognizant of, if you aren't able to do things efficiently and you aren't able to remain competitive, there's probably a bigger threat to jobs anyway. So, we talking about repurposing, maybe re-envisioning opportunities that fall outside of the direct mining entity per se. But there's a stimulated economy far broader than just the mining itself.
Great.
Thanks. That brings us to the end of this webinar. We have answered most of the questions because there was quite a lot of overlap amongst them. So thank you so much for your time, guys. Deshnee, Colin, and Lerato. I think it's been such a pleasure having you guys and, getting to tap into your knowledge and your experience in the space. It's been so valuable to us and I think to our participants and attendees as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Gaynor, Lynn, and team. Colin and it's been fun.
Awesome. So to our attendees, if we can ask you to share the recording with your friends, with your colleagues in the industry, we will be putting this up on the LinkedIn page shortly, as well as Facebook. And we will keep you posted on the next webinar that we have lined up for you. And we look forward to having you guys there as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Stay safe.